And we're live. And before we get started, I just gotta record something that is gonna help me later. So if you're watching this stream after the fact, I'm sorry about this, but it will only take about 10 seconds, and feel free to follow along with what I'm asking. If you've watched this far into the video, if you watched this far into the video, it would really help me if you would subscribe to the channel or give the video a like. It's really helpful, and it gives me sort of an indication of where I need to go with the channel. It's good enough. If you've watched this far into the video, give it a like, or even you could subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out. If you've watched this far into the video, please give it a like, or you even consider maybe subscribing to the channel. It really helps me now that I'm starting up this small channel, and it gives me some direction on what I need to do, and I can see what you kind of like. Thank you. Let's call that that's great. That's good. All right. I'm even showing the article. Generative UI versus vibe coding. Who's designing? I don't necessarily know exactly what generative UI is. I can maybe guess that it's about being more conscientious about the interface rather than just letting the computer do its thing. But I'm not sure, and I'm interested to see what Norman Nielsen Group has to say about this. Summary here. With generative UI, the AI system decides to generate an interactive element or entire product in response to a user need. Vibe coding is when the users request the AI to build it. So if we unpack that, generative UI is more, it's more control in the person asking for it. It's not as simple as just saying, I want this thing, but rather code something that does this thing in order to satisfy this user need, rather than saying, I need this thing. Okay. Since Andrei Karpathy coined the term vibe coding in early 2025, the concept has taken over the conversation about AI and interfaces. Describe what you want, and the AI builds it. There are many variations of that concept, and all of them are relevant to the design community right now, as they impact both how our teams work and the users they design for. Yeah, I mean, this is something that stresses people out in the sort of development and design communities. It is a new time, and we need to find our places. So hopefully this article will help. But vibe coding is not generative UI, Gen UI. It's a hard thing to say. The difference is about who makes the decision to build an interactive system or component. This distinction gets blurry in practice, and that's exactly why it's worth defining carefully. The line between them determines what we hold the AI accountable for: execution fidelity or design judgment. Okay. Different flavors of AI-generated interfaces. First, some definitions. The landscape of AI-generated and AI-assisted interfaces includes several overlapping concepts. Generative UI refers to interfaces where the AI system decides to produce a visual or interactive element. The system initiates the design. We've been thinking and talking about Gen UI's future potential since early 2024, but only recently have examples of true Gen UI been appearing in real life. Most of those examples are currently happening within AI chatbots, other than highly experimental ones. Okay. Vibe coding means that the user describes what they want and the AI builds it. But how do you do generative UI? Okay. The user asks the system to create a particular software product, an application, a website, etc., often without specifying any implementation details, specific language or design patterns to be used. Karpathy describes it as a fully surrendering control. forget that the code even exists. In practice, many people use the term more loosely to describe any AI-driven development, though purists argue that's a misuse. AI-assisted design means using AI-based tools within a professional design workflow, generating wireframes, prototyping variations, or exploring layout options as part of building a product for an end-user audience. So are we saying that Gen UI, you're actually letting the AI do more than vibe coding? The system even decides that, yeah, we should do a design here. We need a new product. I'm not sure. In this article, I focus on comparing generative UI and vibe coding specifically. Okay. Okay, so an AI system produces a UI. Was AI used as a tool within the traditional design process? If yes, that's AI assisted design. So that's mainly what I do when I use AI at work, is I put it into a process step and I try to ask it to do something, maybe generate an image or make it help me with defining requirements based on a user journey, something like that. Who decided to create the UI? Okay, so the AI system decided to create the UI because it would be better than just having text. So it gives you a UI. I wonder what's a good use case for that. When does that happen? Okay, and then if the user initiates the process, that is vibe coding. The user asks the AI to build an interface. And then you can have a vague description or a detailed description. And if it's very detailed, I kind of think that it goes into the same, it becomes almost AI assisted design. Okay, I like this image. This is good. Who asks for the design? Either the AI designs an UI element would serve the user better than text, or the user explicitly asks the system to build something. In generative UI, the user asks the question or states a goal, either explicitly in chat or implicitly by their behavior in a product. And the system decides that the response should include one or more interactive elements, such as checkboxes, interactive data visualization, clarification widgets, or full-blown complex interfaces. The user didn't request a checkbox. The AI made a judgment call that the experience would benefit from having one. Okay, so maybe it would be something like asking an AI to list out all the things that I should be doing before 10 o'clock in the morning. And it lists that out, but it also gives me a graphical user interface in terms of checkboxes where I can click something, and that would be Gen UI. Okay. I learned something today. That judgment call is the defining act of Gen UI. The system assessed the situation and determined that the best response would include one or more visual interactive UI element. This is a design decision made in real time by the AI. Vibe coding works differently. The user initiates and directs the construction. For example, build me a London trip planner app. Create a dashboard for my expenses. Make a quiz about European capitals. The user knows they want an interface and asks for one. The AI's role is in execution, translating the user's intent to a working artifact. That's valuable, but it's a different kind of work. Yeah, that's definitely different. It's weird, that distinction between using AI to build you something that you've defined, or getting presented with something that will solve a problem. Okay. The specification spectrum within vibe coding. Even within vibe coding, there's a further dimension. How much does the user specify and how much do they delegate? For example, consider the prompt, build me a trip planner. This leaves the AI significant room to make structural and strategic choices, layout, interaction patterns, information hierarchy. Yeah, okay, so basically you get something, but you don't know what it is. It's just a trip planner. I think one interesting part of this is, even though you get presented with one option, and I think this is the danger with vibe coding, when you get presented with an option like this and it looks so good, you have a tendency, I find, to start thinking that this is what I asked for. It's not. There would be a million other ways to do a trip planner as opposed to this, but because you've been presented with this version of something, that makes it so this is what you think you want to design. And I think that's one of the biggest weaknesses with using generative AI to do design early in the process or as a concept generation step, is that you get locked into, for example, like something simple like having these buttons at the top here. I'm not sure that's what the optimal place for a new trip or a share button. Maybe it is. Maybe that is a standard way of doing it. But I think just because you have been shown this one way of doing things, you kind of get locked in to using those design elements and those ways of doing it. I find that makes me kind of like a little bit sad almost. It takes away from the profession. Okay, but compare that to this prompt. Build me a trip planner with a 3-column layout. Left column is fixed position, interactive map using Mapbox with custom pin color coded by activity type. And then it goes on and on and on with design decisions. And I mean, this is kind of what I'm asking for. If you do it like this, probably you've sketched it out beforehand, or you have a very clear idea. But preferably you would have sketched it out and you could see that, okay, I want to go in this direction, now build this for me. This version leaves very little up to the AI system. It's executing a designer's vision. Most people cannot and would not try to imagine or specify this level of detail to reach such an outcome. Yeah, and this is where designers can definitely collaborate with UI to make something that is really cool. I don't know. I find these examples to be good because this looks like every AI generated thing that I have ever seen in terms of interface, whereas this actually looks like something that has been made by a person. It kind of has and it hasn't. But I find it to be such a cool difference just by making sure that you use your design knowledge and you sort of apply that to the prompt. You can actually get some of that human touch. And I think that's interesting. Oh, hello there. There's someone actually looking. Hi, I'm talking about design, Norman Nielsen. In both cases, the user initiated the construction, but the degree of design judgment the AI exercises varies enormously. This range of specification on the vibe coding side of the line is why some people get confused by the distinction between vibe coding and generative UI. I think that's interesting. This version of vibe coding I can kind of get behind as a quick way of doing things if you've done the concepting beforehand. I like that. The problem with the build your own everything argument. Vibe coding enthusiasts believe that AI will let everyone build their own custom software for everything they need. And this is very tiresome. And I don't know if this was true, I think you would see a lot more people trying to get a lot more software out there. And this narrative was blamed for a big drop in software stocks in February. I can imagine, but I don't think that's the right take. I don't think you should start selling off your software stock just I mean, yeah, why pay for Slack when your company can just generate its own version? Why subscribe to project management tools when you can vibe code one that fits your exact workflow? I think back to the hundreds of user research sessions I've conducted and observed, where I've been seen firsthand how bad most people are at identifying and articulating what they want from a digital product or service. Experienced designers might find it easy to describe the interface they want to build. Most people do not. And I think this is true, but I don't think it's all up to the interface in this case. I think even finding function, even finding what it is you want to build is not as easy as just writing down a wish list and then presenting that to a computer. There's a lot of work going into defining features and figuring out how to do things and what are really relevant things that you want to have in software. And then on top of that, you have the difficulty in describing what you want from a user interface. So there's a lot of things in the design process that are kind of hard to pin down. And I agree with this. Most people don't know how to build software or define software. But I think there's also a third level, which is the sort of technical side of this, where it's not easy for people to ask for the right levels of security or data integrity for something. If you have a Slack version that you vibe coded, but it's not safe, that's going to be really scary. It's going to be very, very hard to prompt something that is secure and it works well and what that you can build on top of. So I think also on the coding side, it's just difficult. I'm not saying that it's impossible, and I'm sure generative AI can help. It's not that it's not useful. It's just not this, everyone can just build their own software. As it is now, I don't know how it's going to be in 5 years or 5 months, but right now, I don't see that, and I don't see this technology getting there anytime soon. Vibe coding assumes users who can think in terms of apps, dashboards, and interaction patterns. That's a meaningful prerequisite, and it's not one most people meet. Gen UI serves the rest. Help me plan my trip is a prompt anyone might type. If a system responds by generating a custom itinerary tool rather than a paragraph of text, someone who would never think to vibe code a trip planner still gets the benefit of an interface designed for their situation. That's the promise of generative UI. Not that the AI becomes a better code generator, but that it becomes a designer. One that makes the interface decision so the user doesn't have to know what they need, let alone try to envision and articulate what it should be, which is extremely hard for people. I mean, yes, but it only works for very narrow use cases. If someone asks the generative AI to build something that is software, it doesn't work. If someone asks the AI to build some or to answer a question or respond to a problem that I'm having specifically, how should I plan my pickup route so that I pick up all the kids going to football practice? And the AI could build something that helps in that specific scenario. But if you would try to generalize that, you would soon run into problems that are kind of, this is not a really good product idea territory. It's very hard to sell something like that, for example, because you can't build something that scales to more than yourself. This is why when people have product ideas and they come to you and they ask you like, oh, I have this idea, couldn't you evaluate that for me? This is why most of the time that's kind of a little bit iffy question to get, because you don't want to let people down and say that, oh, I don't believe that your idea is commercially viable. This is the reason for that. So I don't think this scales, and that is one aspect of this. There's also an argument for specialized software that the build your own everything narrative overlooks. Part of the value of a dedicated company building communication or product management software is the institutional knowledge they accumulate from years of user research, iterative refinement, observing how the tool performs across thousands of different organizational contexts. LLMs don't inherently have that depth baked in. The idea that every team will vibe code its own Slack replacement feels wasteful when the real value of those tools comes from design maturity that no ad hoc prompt can replicate. I don't know that that is the problem. I think there are enough descriptions of good communication software that you could actually get a good description of a communication software. Building is hard because it's so complex, and the computer can't really handle that as it is now. There's too much just randomness baked into the whole thing, and it doesn't really work like that. I find that when I start a project and using AI, and then when it comes to a certain point, the context window is sort of, you reach a peak and you can't go any further with that. So it's really hard to build products, and generative AI doesn't really help you with a lot of that stuff. This is where Gen UI carries a higher design burden than vibe coding. When the user specifies what they want, the AI is accountable for execution quality. Does the thing work as described? When the AI decides what to generate, it's accountable for the design decisions. Right now, if you leave design decisions up to an AI system, you tend to get generic looking outputs, random layout choices that don't quite make sense, content errors, visual complexity without clear purpose. Gen UI's success will be measured not by how impressive the generated elements look, but how well the AI reads the moment. And it can't. It can't read the moment. It can't understand things, and that makes this sort of hard. I don't believe Gen UI will be useful for anything that is more complex than the things that was stated earlier in the article with checklists and simple widgets, basically. I don't think generative UI will be a product creator. In the near future, we will start to see the AI customizations moving beyond the UI to accelerate and customize interfaces without the visual sparkle icons or beta features callouts. This is closer to how Sarah Gibbons and I originally imagined generative UI. Essentially, this is what now is being called invisible AI. Invisible AI is when AI-driven customization happens behind the scenes of an existing product. The system adjusts the interface based on user behavior, context, and goals without the user explicitly asking for anything. Think of a productivity tool that surfaces the relevant templates before you know to search for it. The AI is doing the design work, but it's woven into the product so seamlessly that the user just experiences a faster, more relevant interface. I don't know. I don't know that it's a wise thing to let go of so much control in that. I'm not sure. I think that's going to be hard. I think a controlled interface has a lot of value. Yeah. And where the evaluation challenges get to the sharpest. If users never ask for an interface change and might not even notice one happened, how do we know it was the right call? We don't, and I don't think that's one of the reasons why this won't work for anything. I think chatbots might be the only place where that can be acceptable because it's so loose. Like, do you want that loose experience in enterprise software? I don't know. I don't think so. Maybe there are special cases. Maybe you have like a checklist app where the AI sort of changes the way the checklist works based on what we're looking at. I don't know. Vibe coding and generative UI fail in different ways. Vibe coding fails when execution is poor. The thing doesn't match intent. Broken features, misinterpreted layouts, a trip planner that ignores half your specifications. The users knew what they wanted, the AI just didn't deliver it. Generative UI fails when judgment is poor. The wrong element was generated, or it shouldn't have been generated at all. An unsolicited interactive dashboard nobody needed in a design is a design failure, even if it's technically flawless. These are fundamentally different failure modes, and they demand different evaluation approaches. What is quality in this context? For both vibe coding and generative UI, quality is measured in how well the system addresses the user need. For a vibe coded artifact, high quality means matching user intent while being usable. A vibe coder asked for a quiz app and can tell whether the result is what they had in mind. I would argue that they can't. They can tell whether they like the result, but knowing whether it was what they had in mind is much harder. For generative UI, quality is whether the response gets the user closer to solving their problem in a way that is as frictionless as possible. It's harder to assess because the user had no prior expectation and may have nothing to compare against. They asked the question, the system decided an interactive chart was the right response. But was it the right response? The user might not have the context to know. This means generative UI needs to be evaluated more like traditional UIs, through user research, task completion metrics, and satisfaction signals. Not just did it render correctly. I don't think I agree. How do you do that? How do you evaluate something like generative UI and hold it to the same standards as a completely controlled experience? You can't. You have to have that randomness and the weirdness be a feature of what you're building. Otherwise, generative UI probably isn't the correct methodology for building a product. Again, I think in chat interfaces, this might work. It might actually be great. I would love for Claude to give me random checklists or things to help me sort through and clarify. And you can sort of have that go off to the side in a project or something. But I don't like that I don't like evaluating it more like traditional UIs. I don't think that's a good take. Finally and crucially, the audience for generative UI is broader than that for vibe coding. Vibe coding empowers people who can articulate what they want to build. Generative UI benefits everyone, including users who don't think to ask for an interface element. That broader reach comes with a higher design burden. The system must make good decisions on behalf of people who can't tell it what they want, which is most people. Yeah, and again, I don't agree with that. I think we have to think differently around what we're using generative UI for, and it can't be to build better controlled experiences, because it's not. It's not a controlled experience. If we want generative UI, it needs to be quirky and weird and sort of fluent and flexible. And the cost of having the wrong element must be very low. It puts a lot of pressure on the user. For example, if you get showed a dashboard with, you have to be able to verify that the data shown in the dashboard is correct, which is, again, hard, which is always the problem with generative AI. So I don't know. But I'm really glad that I got to read this article, because generative UI is something I haven't thought about before, and I think it's something that we should think about more. So good job, Nielsen Norman Group. All right. Let's jump into our second article for tonight. AI and the human voice. Only humans can do subtle poetry. Sometimes I do workshops with teams about writing and workshop in the open. Those workshops often include a bit of writing, bad first drafts, and how it's good to knock out lots of drafts frequently. They help you think, and they help teams work out what they want to share and how. This is one of my greatest sort of sadnesses when it comes to AI, is I'm writing less. It's not only that I'm using generative AI to produce a lot of text, it's that I don't produce texts like I used to. I used to like to create shitty blog posts and just write for people to read. And that driving force of having people read it was really rewarding for me. I thought that was kind of neat, that I could write something and I could think about it. And now I don't, because I don't believe that people want to see text that could be AI generated. And how do I distinguish my writing from AI generated text? I could write really well, but it sort of drains the energy out of writing for me. And I'm that makes me sad. I'm not happy about that, because they do help you think. Writing is really good for the sort of brain. The process of writing is thinking. And I should really get into the habit of doing that more again, because it's really lovely. Why should we follow your advice? But of course, drafting things is something that AI tools are supposed to be good at. Here's something someone said to me in a recent workshop. Why should we follow your advice when we're consistently being told by senior management to make more use of AI? Writing first draft is exactly the sort of task I'd ask Copilot to do. So yes, fair point. Here's my response to that. First of all, I'll come clean about where I stand, generally speaking. I am an AI skeptic, especially on using AI for writing. I can see it being useful for other things, but that's because I'm a writer, right? And yeah, I think that is true. Generally, you don't want AI to take away your thing that you're doing. I see AI generated text most of the time, and I think it's rubbish. It's dull, it's derivative, it always sounds like 1,000 other things I've read before, because the AI has been trained on those thousands of things, all now easy to find on the internet. But do I think AI is quite good at making simple software or basic web tools? Well, yeah, I tried it for that and thought, yeah, this isn't too shabby. Yeah, but when you speak to a developer, most of the time what they're going to say, or at least people that I trust to be good developers, is that it is actually pretty shabby. It's weird code and just strange. And of course, I would think that, wouldn't I? I don't know better. I'm not a software engineer. I have a feeling that everyone likes using AI tools to try doing something when else is professional. Okay, so I'm just echoing what the person here is writing. Chilist. I have a feeling that everyone likes using AI tools to try doing someone else's profession. They are much less keen when someone else uses it for their profession. I fall into the same trap as everyone else. I recognize and admit to my own bias. So bias in hand, allow me to plow through with some opinions. AI thinks good writing is full of cliches. I think AI is a terrible writer. Lots of people disagree with me, especially people who aren't professional writers. So let me try and prove my point. I am not a professional writer. I do think AI is a really bad writer. I can be fooled by someone that is good at prompting, and I know that people that are really good at reading, that would be writers, don't get fooled as easily. But I think you can do a lot of stuff, but it's very hard to get all of the way. Have a look at tropes.md. It's a markdown config file that you can use to instruct your AI tool to avoid doing certain things when it drafts text for you. It has a lot of advice for AI bots, like don't use rich tapestry or complex landscape or pivotal moment, or is it worth nothing? It's worth nothing, or this is my own favorite. Laser focus. Don't use XYZ, serves as ABC, or it's not X, it's Y, etc. Look carefully at the tropes, at what tropes.md is telling AI to avoid. There's a simple way of summing up its advice. Cliches. It's a list of cliches. And tropes.md is just formalizing the advice. Avoid cliches. This is an age-old advice that has been around for almost as long as writing. Yeah, I mean, if you read a book about writing guidelines, cliches is something that is to be avoided. I find that hard being a foreigner because I tend to think that like the cliches go into the language so like intimately that for me that haven't grown up with it, it becomes the language and it is the words that you use for something. In Swedish, I'm much better at not using cliches, but in English, it's very hard. It's hard for non-professional writers to spot because cliches feel normal. After all, we use them verbally every day. It's raining cats and dogs. It seems very old. I don't know that we use that every day. Let's take this offline. Let's think outside the box. Yeah. This is why AI writing makes me roll my eyes. If a junior writer sent me a draft with that many cliches in it, I would ask them to write it again without them. It's the cliches that make AI text sound so derivative. I mean, it's also the M dashes. I think it's interesting. This writer is not using M dashes. They're using just dashes, and it looks much better. I don't know if this person would use M dashes before. It's funny. I just learned how to use M dashes right before sort of the advent of generative AI, and then I have to de-learn using M dashes because you can't use M dashes when you write something. It just doesn't look good. It's super weird. So yeah, I wanted to use it and now I can't. Here's another thing that professional writers would tell you. Not all cliches are bad all the time. Sometimes it's good to use a cliche. Sometimes it helps you make a point or express something with more clarity. Human writers learn how and when to add cliches. They know how to dial the clichéness up and down responsibly. Human writers have or can learn how to use language with subtlety. AI writing tools can't do that. And yeah, this is one of the weaknesses with AI tools. It doesn't sort of dial things in the correct way. And it's funny when I have written something using AI and I start trying to dial that knob of like how it feels, it's very, very tricky to do that well. It's almost always easier to just take what it has written and rewrite it if you have a very specific like tone or feeling that you want to convey. So yeah, it's hard. When I'm doing my workshop with teams, the main advice I give for anyone wanting to make their text more approachable, wanting to actually use the human voice, is to add tiny sprinklings of poetry. They're so tiny people won't notice them. That's the point. They don't dominate, but they are additive. They add something to the whole. They're flourishes that we automatically add when we're talking, but few of us remember to mix in to our writing. But few of us remember to mix into our writing. I'd argue they humanize text that would otherwise be dry as a stick. A little alliteration, a gentle pun, a joke, a witty subheading, a subtle callback to a point made earlier, perhaps by reusing the same words, but in a different order, a playful bit of punctuation, deliberately bad sentences, repetition. Adding just tiny sprinkles of some of these to a piece of text will make it sound more like speech, be easier to read, and be more memorable afterwards. And this kind of is interesting because I have this theory that people are going to start adding spelling mistakes to generative AI text just in order to make people read it, because I think many people find that if they're sent something generated by AI, it's kind of hard to put the effort in to read it, because you know that the person sending it hasn't put in the effort to write it. So why should I read it? But if you put some problem into the text, will that make you sort of look into it more thoroughly? I'm not sure. But I had a conversation with a friend where we agreed that that is probably going to be one effect of people using LLMs to write, because it doesn't do spelling errors. So if you add that to it, it would humanize the text. It's a very blunt way of doing what the author is saying here. I wouldn't recommend it. It's much better to train to become a poet, as they say. But it is interesting. Thing is, you can ask an LLM to write a poem about anything, and it'll do it. Any style you like, any subject matter. But in most work-related circumstances, we don't want poems. The tiny sparklings of poetry are helpful, but no one's looking for a corporate strategy plan in rhyming couplets. AI can't do subtle, playful flourishes in text because it has no sense of subtlety. AI goes all in. Either it writes you a poem or it doesn't. And I mean, it's trained on predominantly like Reddit, which is decidedly not poetry. So it's not so strange that it can't shift between these two things, because it either writes as Reddit does or it writes as this person does, but it doesn't have nearly as much training to sound like this. So yeah, it's going to sound like Reddit most of the time. It cannot figure out how to be subtly poetic in tiny doses where appropriate. It doesn't know what appropriate is, and it doesn't know anything, so that checks out. But you do. You know it when you read it. It makes you smile or raise an eyebrow or make a note or pass it on to a friend. Human writing needs human input. Okay, sure, if you want to, or if your boss is insisting on it, go ahead and use AI tools to write something for you. Perhaps feed Tropes MD into it and see if it helps. Maybe it will. But think about your goal. You want humans to read the text. To get people to pay attention to it, take it in, to remember what it says, you're going to have to study your AI's first draft with a particularly careful eye. Apply your sense of the poetic. Add some tiny sparkles where they make sense. Do the work to make it sound human by adding a few of the flourishes you'd add without thinking if you were speaking to your audience directly. Get a body check from a human colleague, not from another AI. Steer the words towards humanity by steering them towards humans. Maybe. I also think that another approach is to always do the first draft on your own. And the reason for that is, in this case, you're losing the flourishes. You're missing the things that make you want to read the text, sure, but at least you've done the thinking if you do the first draft. So in order to get more ideas, I think it's not a bad idea to just take the time to actually read. Yeah. Okay. I want to do some thumbnails. I don't know. Maybe that works. So let's take a 10-second break. And welcome back again. So let's see here. How AI is changing product discovery and what it shouldn't replace. A frequent question that I've been getting from my clients lately is some version of how should my team actually be using AI? It's asked with a mix of curiosity, pressure, and a real fear of falling behind. It comes in all shapes and sizes. I just got to check Gabrielle Bufrem. Product leader. A frequent question I've been getting from my clients lately is some version of how should my team actually be using AI? It's asked with a mix of curiosity, pressure, and a real fear of falling behind. It comes in all shapes and sizes. The VP of product who admits he can't tell if his team is truly learning or just generating more stuff, and is worried that all this stuff won't actually move the needle for the business, and he knows better than just try it. The empowered product team that feels guilty that AI can write a user flow faster than they can think it through. It's constantly wondering how they can make it a bigger difference. The founder who keeps getting sent beautiful prototypes that still don't answer the real questions or solve actual business problems. AI has given product teams more velocity than ever. So why does it all feel less grounded? That's the question I'll answer in this letter. I'll share why this is happening, the risk it introduces, and how to win in the age of AI. I think it kind of answers the question is answered in this introduction. The problem is that you're not grounding things and you're not working things through, and you're handing off a lot of the responsibility to the AI. I think if you don't do the first draft, if you don't do the research, if you don't take notes, you're at every step of the way, you're handing off responsibility to a machine. And that has to be a conscious, very conscious decision to do that in every instance. Because otherwise you're handing off a lot of responsibility and control to the AI without getting anything back that might be useful. It can be useful, but it is a statistical machine that is going to produce a statistical output based on what you input. So the more control you take over that, the better it is. And I haven't seen any system, any scaffolding that removes that random variability and makes it a more consistent experience. So I think be careful is probably the answer. But let's go through the article. For most of my career, the constraints around discovery and delivery set boundaries for us. You couldn't generate 50 ideas in a minute or prompt an AI to create an incredible user experience in moments. You had to wrestle with the work. Prototypes required real thought. Sure, they were a much better and cheaper way to test than building the product itself, but it took time and resources. You simply couldn't build things immediately. That was the constraint, and it shaped how we thought. Now everything has changed. My clients tell me their designers can spin up 3 different directions before lunch. Engineers use AI to scaffold entire solutions in hours. Product managers feel like they're drowning in possibilities. What was once scarce is now abundant, and this abundance is making it even more important for product leadership and teams to think deeply. Before, thinking was built in because the limitations demanded it. We don't have that luxury anymore. The best companies are using this abundance to their advantage. Ignoring it isn't the answer, but neither is running wild with it. We need to learn how to use it well, and that means strong product thinking is more critical than ever. Because when everything becomes easy to make, it becomes much harder to know what matters. No, and I think that is correct. I think we kind of have to, but I've seen this myself. I was in a project that I didn't feel very inspired to be honest, to do. I didn't think it was fun. I wasn't feeling at all enthusiastic about it. So I started the project by just inputting the brief into the computer, and it spat out a lot of design artifacts and things. And I mean, in the beginning, I could use those artifacts to just simply not do the work, to feel like I was doing the work, but I was more just going through the motions of reading what the AI spat out. And it was not until a couple of weeks later that I realized that, oh, I actually have to go back and look at, unfortunately, I had recorded the interviews. So I went back to the interviews and I wrote down by hand everything that was said in those interviews. And I did my analysis as I usually do. And I was able to come up with some actual useful solutions. So just thinking things through and not taking shortcuts, not just taking the transcript from the interview, feeding it to an AI, and then getting some analysis out. That's not going to do the trick. You need to do it yourself, and then you can cross references by using the sort of quicker AI driven flow. But I think you need to think before you do that, just to get a frame of reference, if nothing else. If you just run off and you do it, it doesn't work like that. Teams stop sitting with the problems long enough to understand it. There's always another prompt to try, and prototyping is more fun than thinking to truly understand users, the business, and the market. Yeah, it is fun. It's like a slot machine. It becomes this dopamine hit. You enter a prompt and you get something out of it, and you see if it works, and it's really nice. Is it helpful? Sometimes, not always. A drift away from real customers. Leaders confess, we've been talking to them less. The AI summaries feel close enough, but they're not. You lose the tiny human detail that sharpen product intuition. You miss the chance to see that moment when something clicks or doesn't in a user's eyes. I think synthetic users is one of the dumbest things. It doesn't do anything. It gives you the feeling of doing work, but it doesn't help at all. If you can get insights from products like that, from synthetic users, you have a very shallow understanding of your product. And yeah, I think you need to refocus. The breakdown of clarity. Constraints used to bring clarity. They force teams to prioritize and make trade-offs. Without them, the path looks wide open, but decision-making gets fuzzier. The team that thrives in the new era are the ones who find ways to create focus anyway. These losses doesn't happen at once, but over time. They quietly pull teams away from the hard and important work of building something that matters to the business and customers. How the best product teams use AI differently. Not every team is drifting. The technology is completely changing the game, not just what we build, but how we build it. The best teams are making deliberate choices. They use AI with intention, stay close to their customers, and protect that thinking that makes great products possible. Here's what they're doing differently. Don't let AI set the agenda. Strong product teams begin with strategy and problems to solve. They resist the temptation to jump straight to solution, even when the tools make it easy. They move quickly, but pause to learn. They build, experiment, and take time to assess the product cycle hasn't changed. These teams are just running it faster and delivering value sooner. They treat AI-generated prototypes the way we used to treat user prototypes. This one might sound obvious, but I've come to learn that it's not, so I'm calling it out. A prototype is still a way to test product risk. Faster and cheaper doesn't always mean better. They talk to more real users, not fewer. AI has created more space by removing lower value work. The best teams have used that space to deepen their understanding of customers. These practices don't happen by accident. They reflect deliberate choices made by product leaders and product teams who understand what matters most, especially now. I think this is really good. We should talk more to users. We should make sure that we have a very good understanding of the problems that we're trying to solve and for whom we're trying to solve it. I think that's a great take. What this means for product leaders today. When clients ask me how their teams should use AI, they are really asking how they should lead in a moment when the speed is no longer scarce. But clarity is in an age where the expectations of that product can and shouldn't do are not only getting higher. Clarity is in an age where expectations of what product can and should. So basically, what she's saying, I don't know why I can't read this sentence, is that you need to get clarity. And yeah, I can't read this. That's weird. It's no longer enough to be the leader who pushes for velocity. The strategy was already, and this is interesting because that's something that I've heard a lot, like just be faster. That might change with this. Um, it's not a good idea to push a lot of features and be very fast if it doesn't do anything for the customers. I think the clearest example of this is teams that start building things without having a great idea of what it is they're trying to build. I'm not advocating for waterfall of defining every product feature. I'm just talking about getting a general sense of what the product does and how it will look so that you can solve the technical issues inside of that boundary. So yeah, but speed isn't enough. So taking it slower isn't enough. Giving your team direction, setting the focus, and coaching your team. That's what you should do as a product leader. If we are talking about product over a cup of coffee, here's what I'd share before anything else. For all the talk about AI and how it's changing the game, and it is, the real lever isn't just speed or automation, it's what makes speed possible. It's what speed makes possible. Deeper thinking, stronger teams, and more space to lead with intention. That's why this is such an exciting time for me as a coach. We're shaping now the blah, blah, blah. Okay, good. I think that's great. I think the main takeaway from this is just use whatever time you can get from automating away tasks to talk to more users and doing those really high value tasks. I would add, like, take notes by yourself, because that is the dumbest trap that I've fallen into in the last couple of years, is transcribing meeting notes automatically and then feeding that into an LLM. If you do take notes, you're going to learn so much more from these interactions. Like, writing by hand is fantastic for understanding someone. Let's go to this one. AI can cost more than human workers now. IT budgets are getting blown out as some companies increasingly spend more on AI than on employees' salaries. Why this matters? Maybe human labor will be more cost efficient after all. And I think this is super interesting because in the last couple of days, we've seen this shift in how AI companies talk about pricing. Copilot are moving over to token-based billing, and I think more companies are going to do that, because I think we're getting to a point where generative AI needs to start showing that it can generate money, and it won't so long as we are subsidizing the usage. Basically, it doesn't work. Yeah, GitHub Copilot are changing. You need to be much more. You need to pay for your tokens. I think this is very scary for a lot of people. This is a tweet about what Claude, the Anthropic, did. They started A/B testing pricing just to see how much money they can get from people. And you can really tell that people are stressed about this. I read somewhere that the average Claude user costs around $6 per day, which is far from the $20 a month that you pay for it. I'm not sure that many people would actually pay $6 a day in order to just Google recipes and do stuff like that. So I think we're getting into a territory where it is getting very expensive. And I'm not sure that a lot of these AI companies can actually survive that. It's getting very hairy at the top. So what people are saying is that for my team, the cost of compute is far beyond the cost of the employees. Uber's chief technology officer already blew through his 2026 AI budget, and that can't work. Like, there's no chance that is going to be acceptable to investors. That AI companies are subsidizing these for very long, because it's so expensive. Maybe Google can subsidize their for longer. But I'm unsure whether the value of AI, because if you take coding as an example, you're basically paying in order to get software created. But you don't know before you start that this iteration of the software is going to be useful. It's like a lottery, and say you prompt for an entire day, maybe costs, I don't know, $200 or something, and then you recognize that, oh, this doesn't fit with our IT stack, or some other problem makes it so that we have to start over. It becomes very, 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 very expensive. So what we're watching, how rising costs impact enterprise spending at the major AI labs. An OpenAI investor told Axios that the shift could benefit them because they think that their product is superior in cutting usage. Yeah. I don't think companies will be okay spending this much money on generated code. I think it's going to be very, very hard to get private people to pay $6 a day, but I think it's going to be even harder to get some companies, if they don't see like demonstrably that they're getting a lot of value out from this. It's hard to see that this can keep going. I think we're probably seeing the end of this first crazy hype area, just because of cost. It just can't go on like this, and that's very interesting. Lastly, I want to talk about this article, the AI layoff trap. But my throat is sore. Oh, there's actually some people here. Hi, I hope you've enjoyed the last couple of minutes that you've been here. I've read some really interesting articles, fascinating times in AI, and I'm hoping that we will see a lot of like cool new developments and a little less crazy hype. But thank you for joining the stream, even though it's fairly late in the stream. If you have any questions, please write to me, and I'm happy to answer some of your questions. I'm unsure how this works actually. Like, is the chat live? It looks like the stream is very like delayed, like 10 minutes delayed. That's something I have to check for next time. Anyhow, this has been a really interesting read today, and I'm looking forward to the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day.